In this video, I'm going to take you through the bursting of the Australian real estate bubble. And the reason that this is important to you is because something like this will be happening all over the world, and it doesn't matter where you live. There's something, whether it's real estate, whether it's stocks, whether it's local businesses. The world's central banks have blown everything into a bubble, and those bubbles were destined to deflate. And coronavirus is just the pin that is popping these massive bubbles. It's going to make it happen much faster, and it'll be far worse than it would have been without coronavirus. But these things were destined to happen. What I'm going to show you here is a section of my upcoming book, The Great Gold and Silver Rush of the 21st Century, and I have cut this portion of the book, at least the second half of what I'm going to show you here, was cut from the book because it's about the Australian real estate bubble, and by the time the book comes out, it will be halfway done crashing, possibly more. And so it'll be yesterday's news at that point. And since I wrote this more than a year ago and was predicting it basically, I want to give it to you now. And this is important stuff for everybody to know. Like I said, there's going to be something like this happening near you. And there is a potential upside to all of these different things. So you have to see both sides of it, not just the bad side. But understanding why it happened and the scale of it gives you the opportunity to sort of predict where it's going to go to. And, that means that there's an opportunity. If it's a massive deflation in real estate, and if it takes place during a period of time where other assets might be going up, for instance, precious metals or cryptocurrencies or something like that, then you'll be able to buy a whole lot more real estate with your cryptos or precious metals if you're invested in that when it happens. Now, the first half of this remains in the book because it's a lesson on economics and a little bit of history, just to set it up so that you understand. You'll see as we go through this that without covering these things first, you wouldn't understand what's going on quite as well in the popping of the Australian real estate bubble. So let's get right into it. This is an excerpt from Chapter 1 of The Great Gold and Silver Rush of the 21st Century. The Perfection of the Free Markets. Put aside any political associations and consider the marvel of the free markets. We spend our lives seeking balance emotionally, spiritually, and professionally, yet there is a balance that needn't be chased into being. All we have to do is watch as the magic unfolds. In fact, if you study it close enough, you'll be absolutely amazed, astounded, and totally in awe of the free market. Without any government or authority mandating or directing it, billions of people, all working in their own self-interest, will deliver to you any of the products of the earth, of science, and of man. Anything and anything is available to us all the time at our local grocery store, mall, gas station, online, or delivered to our doorstep. And this is a quote. The great virtue of a free market is that it does not care what color people are. It does not care what their religion is. It only cares whether they can produce something that you want to buy. It is the most effective system we have discovered to enable people who hate one another to deal with one another and help one another. Milton Friedman, Why Government is the Problem. A free market, through the trillions upon trillions of transactions in a society, will eventually set supply and demand for goods and services in equilibrium while balancing all the different sectors of an economy. One never outpaces the other, at least not for very long. The price is right. It does this through something called price discovery. The market is always trying to find the perfect price for everything, and it achieves this through the process of the multitudes of buyers and sellers haggling to strike a deal. Stocks, bonds, energy, cars, transportation, real estate, shipping, clothing, food, air travel, entertainment, medical care, everything. It is always trying to find a price that will strike the perfect balance between buyers and sellers, between supply and demand. If the price of a product is too high, there will be an oversupply simply because there is too much profit in it. The high profit will cause the producers to make more of it and also cause other people to jump into the same business as well. At the same time, there will be less demand because fewer people will be able to afford it. This oversupply and underdemand will eventually cause the price to fall until all of the excess goods are sold. On the other hand, if the price is too low, shortages will develop. This is because too many people will want the product, which is over demand, but nobody will want to make it because there's not enough profit in it, under supply. The free market is like an economic Goldilocks. It is always looking for a price that is not too hot but not too cold, not too soft but not too firm, and not too low but not too high. It's looking for a price that is just right. For some reason, profit and price have become dirty words in today's society, yet our very survival depends upon both. If the compensation for your work is less than the cost of sustaining you over that same period of time, you will eventually die. Everyone must have profit to survive. Profit creates all of our prosperity. It is the incentive to work, learn, trade, and innovate. Prices communicate the most important information in an economy. In a free market, if there is a shortage of an item, people competing for that item will bid up its price. The higher price means that there is more profit producing the item, so more of it will be produced. Conversely, if there is too many of something, the price will fall. The free, unfettered communication of prices in an economy will eventually set supply and demand in equilibrium and create great prosperity for us all. But when an authority dictates or attempts to regulate prices or profits, the results can be disastrous. If you've ever seen pictures of the bread lines and empty store shelves in the Soviet Union, that was the result of the authorities deciding the bread was too expensive. When it comes to meddling with an economy, there are always unintended consequences. There is always a price to pay, so to speak. In China in 1958, Chairman Mao created a program called the Great Leap Forward, which was supposed to launch China's economy past that of the United States. One of the initiatives was a new way to feed the people. It seemed that Mao didn't much like the idea of prices or profit and considered farmers to be greedy capitalists who were making a profit at the expense of the people they fed. So the farms were nationalized, the farmers were ostracized, jailed, and some even executed. The farm laborers were put in charge of the farms, and community kitchens were opened so they could all feed each other for free. How did this work out? Well, the numbers are a little sketchy, but historians estimate that over the next 4 years, somewhere between 18 and 60 million people starved to death, with most estimates averaging around 30 million. Throughout millennia, the total chaos of the free market has always proven superior to central planning. Centrally planned economies have always created misery and death, and authoritarian tampering and manipulation of the free market is absolutely lethal. Throughout history, there has always been an astronomical cost with economic meddling. When the authorities promise they're going to give us stuff for free, whatever politicians promise to get elected, it always sounds like a good idea at first, but they don't understand economics. There is always unpredictable blowback and unintended consequences that come with poking and prodding an economy. They're not evil, they're well-intentioned. But there is a reason for the saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. The free market is a balance that verges on the sacred. It should be nurtured and protected from interference and manipulation. Mankind has tried numerous alternatives to free market capitalism, and none of them have ever come anywhere close to providing the immense prosperity the free market can create. If we would just allow it to work, allow it to do what it is supposed to do, it will always supply us with what we want and need. Getting a schooling. There are many different schools of economic thought, and the opposite of Keynesian economics is known as the Austrian school. Austrian economists believe that the complexity of ever-evolving markets and subjective choices driven by human emotion make Keynesian mathematical modeling of an economy not only naive and pointless, but virtually impossible. They also believe that price discovery is the only mechanism that can balance an economy, and that the market must remain free from interference and manipulation for it to work. Pulling it forward. Interest rates are just the price of currency. If the interest rate is 5%, then the price of borrowing $100 is $5. When Keynesian central bankers expand the currency supply and lower interest rates, it causes an artificial boom, because when the price of currency is cheap, more people borrow. The reason people borrow is to buy things. When a bunch of people with a bunch of new currency all try to buy a bunch of stuff at the same time, then the sales of goods and services suddenly soar. Then, to keep up with the increasing demand, businesses must also borrow some of that cheap currency to invest in new equipment, production lines, buildings, and employees. All of this new prosperity sounds really good, but there's one problem. When someone makes a purchase with borrowed currency, they're basically pulling forward a transaction that might have happened sometime in the future to make that transaction today. Because who wants to wait a few years when they can have that latest fashion, shiny new car or bigger house right now? The problem I was talking about comes when they must forego future transactions, which equal the same amount plus a little more to pay for the interest in order to pay off the loan. This causes future demand to fall. Also, many people become loaned up, meaning they are no longer creditworthy, and many others just don't want to take on any more debt. This lack of new loans in the future compounds the falling demand, because with fewer new loans, there are also fewer new transactions. So now you've got a whole bunch of businesses that have taken on a whole bunch of new debt to fill a demand that is no longer there. Even in normal times, some businessmen make bad decisions, and so a certain number of failures and bankruptcies is to be expected. But with so many businesses that all took on extra debt at the same time, all experiencing falling demand simultaneously, many of them will have to lay off employees or file for bankruptcy to survive. Or, worse than that, they may even have to go out of business. All of the people who lose their jobs will then have to cut back, stop making purchases, and some of them will lose their homes. All of the excess homes on the market will then cause the price of homes to fall, and so the downward spiral goes. This is the boom-bust cycle we are all trapped in, and it is all caused because of what Austrian school economists call malinvestment due to distorted price signals. That fancy term just means that when a monetary authority dictates a false, artificially low price of currency, it causes a false boom in purchases that are simply being pulled from the future. This causes businesses to misinterpret the long-term needs and demands of an economy, which causes them to mistakenly borrow and mistakenly invest for the long term in equipment, production lines, buildings, and employees, all to service an economic boom that was nothing but a short-term illusion. In other words, the creation of all that fake currency and fake credit causes transactions to be pulled forward, leading to a fake boom, and then when transactions eventually slow to pay for the debt, it leads to a very real bust, a bust that would not have happened had they just allowed the market to remain free. On the edge of a cliff. The best analogy I can think of is, when you borrow, you're going out into the future, digging a hole, and bringing back the dirt so you can stand atop a higher mound today. Since we continuously move forward in time, tomorrow we must go even further out into the future, dig up enough dirt to fill the hole that is in front of us so that we don't fall in, and then we always bring back a little extra dirt so we can stand on yet a higher mound. And here's some renderings I had made of the process. And you can imagine like a 30-year treasury bond, a 20-year, a 10-year, 5, and so on, down to a 30-day treasury bond. we're borrowing out of the future at different paces. And when we move forward into the future, so this is a 30-year, but this 20-year was also last decade's 30-year. So we're digging that deeper. It's the 20 plus the 30, and the 20 plus the 30 plus the 10, and so on. So we dig this pit, and then we've got to fill in this before we can move, time. We can't stop time's forward march. We're always moving forward. And so we've got to fill in this pit before the time elapses. But, inevitably something will happen. So we keep on filling in that pit. But then tomorrow, when we move atop this mound, we've got to go and we've got to dig this 30-year Treasury bond, the 10-year, the 20-year, the 10-year, and so on and so forth. And if this is an individual, you can imagine this as your home loan that goes out 30 years, and then your car payments that go out 5 years, and then you've got credit cards and other debt that's short-term debt. So it's the same scenario, whether it's an individual or whether it's a government borrowing us all into a hole. So this is the process that we're continuously going through. So during the boom times, we keep digging the pit deeper and deeper while building the mound higher and higher. The longer and bigger the boom, the higher the mound and the deeper the pit. Then, when the future finally arrives, and it always does, we find ourselves standing on a high cliff staring down into the Grand Canyon below. The problem is that we can't just stand there. We can't stop time's forward march. We absolutely must fall into the pit someday. The inevitability is inescapable because we are always on the edge of a cliff, and someday something will go wrong. A deadly fog down under. So now we're at the Australian real estate bubble, and everything we've been through sets you up to be able to fully understand this. The best example of a tangled web of Keynesian economics and government meddling that has actually worked out for a fairly extended period of time is probably Australia. Their last recession was in 1991, and their now massive real estate bubble started in July of 2000. That was when the government introduced a goods and services tax, a GST, of 10%, which also placed a huge burden on businesses because of a bunch of added accounting and governmental compliance. Knowing that a consumption tax would affect the poor and the middle class a lot more than the rich, and also negatively impact the real estate market, the government simultaneously passed the First Homeowners Grant, FHOG, a government-funded program where low-income first-time homebuyers receive a $7,000 grant. It always amazes me how people think that the government can actually give them stuff for free. They say, it's government funded, when the government actually has no funds to hand anybody until it takes those funds from somebody else. Governments don't actually produce anything except burdens. In this case, the program is actually being funded by the new tax with all of its associated burdens to give one group of people a $7,000 gift that never has to be repaid at the expense of everyone else. And don't forget that all of the government bureaucrats that manage this mess must also get paid out of those same taxes. Maybe that's why they call it the FHOG program. They create a fog so thick that nobody can actually see the sleight of hand that's taking place. If this stuff actually works, then why don't all governments everywhere just give everyone homes for free? It's government funded, isn't it? So what's the big deal? Australia didn't experience a recession during the global financial crisis of 2008. Instead, while real estate was crashing in most of the first world, Australia's real estate bubble just took a pause to catch its breath and then kept on running. They did this by slashing interest rates and passing the First-Time Homeowners Boost, a one-year government-funded program that gave an extra $7,000 for an existing home or $14,000 for a new home to low-income buyers. Yes, the FHOB, the FOB, actually sat on top of the FHOG, the FOG. The government actually took currency from all Australians in the form of tax so that they could give to anyone who could prove that they couldn't really afford a home $14,000 to buy an existing home or $21,000 for a new home so that they could borrow and go into debt to have that new house right now. I once gave presentations in Sydney and Melbourne, Australia, and I showed the audiences chart after chart of data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the Reserve Bank of Australia, the Federal Reserve, and the University of New South Wales, which proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that they were in a massive real estate bubble, far larger than the real estate bubble in the United States in 2006 and 2007, and that was way back in 2013. Today, Australia is coming to the end of the second largest economic expansion of any country in recorded history, 28 years. While the officials celebrate this as a victory of government policy, I'm pretty certain that things look good to them simply because they're just standing on a higher mound. Recently, home prices have begun to fall, so the Reserve Bank of Australia has slashed interest rates and reduced lending standards to make homes more affordable for people that can't really afford homes. I think they're about to see just how deep the pit really is. My heart goes out to the millions of Australians who are going to get hurt by this. People who were duped by economically ignorant politicians who, to get elected, sold them false dreams and empty promises. Politicians who were supported by misguided Keynesian economists who told them they could wave a wand and create magic wealth. And it was all supported and directed by clueless central bankers who have the arrogance to think they know more about how to run an economy than the free market, which is the sum total of all the transactions in a free society. But it isn't just Australia who's been taken in by Keynesian economics, it's the entire world. All I can say is, watch what happens next. The bill always comes due someday. One day, those Keynesians are going to get a real schooling, and it's going to be from the Austrian school. Accurate price signals are crucial to the stability of an economy. But when a market is manipulated and not allowed to be free, it causes oversupply, undersupply, bubbles, busts, and for the few who can see it, immense opportunity. Now, when I wrote this, this was all written for the opportunity side, to be able to get ready for what was coming. This was written over a year ago, this portion that I'm cutting from the book, and I want to take you now to a presentation that I gave in Australia back in 2013, and the bubble just kept on being inflated from there. And this will show you how bad things are going to be in Australia. It's going to really be very tragic. But for the people that are positioned properly, it's going to be an immense opportunity. And you do have to have some people survive financially in order for the country to move on. And so now, here is the presentation. The presentations that I gave in Australia were given in two parts. And the first portion covered freedom, economics, bubbles, and dangerous people. And the part that I want to cover here is Australia's bubble. And this is first-time home buyers as a percentage of financed homes. So all the homes being financed, what percentage were first-time home buyers? And what you see here is that it was going on, and there seemed to be a natural equilibrium that was maybe about 22% or so on the average. And then they announced that they were talking about this bill that they were thinking of passing called the First-Time Homeowners Grant. And everybody waited for that grant to happen. So the first-time homeowners buyers stopped buying, basically, and waited to buy and finance their home. And then they all bought, and that basically pulled demand from the future down here and put it all in these couple of years. But then the manipulation actually made things worse as far as the percentage of first-time homeowners. And then this started to recover, and we went into the crisis of '08. And if they had just left things alone, this probably would have eventually stabilized back at this natural equilibrium percentage. But they didn't. What they did was they passed. So you've got the first-time homeowners grant, $7,000 to every first-time home buyer on July 1st, 2000. And home prices, this just amazes me. You do stuff like this, home prices rose an average of $32,000 in a year because of this extra demand that was actually just being pulled forward from the future. And so it caused all the home prices to rise. Then they passed the first-time homeowners boost, which was $14,000 for new homes, and $14,000 for existing homes, $21,000 for new homes. And that caused all this demand. So over 30% of all loans for a little while were the first-time home buyers. But then it's just being pulled forward from the future here. So it doesn't really work. All it does is create these temporary bubbles and busts, and it's part of the manipulation of the economy. And remember that this is all from a 2013 presentation. So here are real home prices, and in 1890, this is indexed to a figure of 100, and so it's the percentage change above and below 100 from the year 1890. And you've got the United States here and our real estate bubble, and then you've got Australia and their real estate bubble. And this is the data in the United States is from Dr. Robert Schiller of Yale University, and the data for Australia is from Nigel Stapleton of University of New South Wales. And so it's their data that I was presenting to the Australian audience, and it shows how massive the bubble was back in 2013, and it kept on going from there. Then I showed how another way of measuring whether something's in a bubble or not, and that's home prices compared to how much disposable income each family has that's buying a home. And this is Reserve Bank of Australia data. And, it went from an average of less than 3 times, 3 years worth of disposable income, basically. And because of all of this manipulation, it caused it to go, it peaked at like 5 times, and who knows where it was just 2 years ago. I don't, because I haven't updated this data. I had already proven they were in a bubble, and one day it's going to burst, and it's going to be devastating. This is total household debt versus income, and you can see the U.S. During the real estate bubble, and then it popped and it went down. Australia's went up and took this breath during the 2008 global financial crisis, but then it just kept on going up. This is household debt in billions, U.S. and Australia, and the U.S. bubble popped and started to collapse. Australia just kept on going. This is the Australian currency supply, data from Reserve Bank of Australia, and it's their M3, and from 1959, back in 2013, it had gone up 227.5 times what it was in 1959. And then there's also something called offshore funding. And then we've got Australian debt. So this is the national debt, basically, in millions. And what you see here is deficits, and then a couple of years of surpluses, and bigger deficits, a couple of years of surpluses, and really big deficits after the global financial crisis. And it all adds up. I mean, you pay down the national debt a little bit, but then you increase it when you run the deficits, and then you decrease it again, and then you increase it when you run the deficits. And that was back in 2012. I don't know what happened since. This is the size of their banking sector versus their GDP of the country. So it's as a percentage of GDP. And this really surprised me when my researchers came up with this. The U.S. and then some other countries, and here is Australia. And I mean, this was just suggesting to me that when their bubble pops, it's going to be major. And then this last one here is the amount of the Australian national income that is reliant on exports to China. And I showed this in a recent video, but 30% of their economy was reliant on exporting stuff to China. And I told them that when China sneezes, you're going to be the ones to catch the cold because this will collapse. Well, China didn't sneeze. It got COVID-19, and it has spread it to the rest of the world. So this is going to collapse way down to here. An enormous portion of the Australian national income is going to vanish because this requires China to be building a bunch of new homes and big buildings and all of these ghost cities that they've been building, which had eventually became occupied. So it worked for the last 30 or 40 years. They've been building these ghost cities. It takes 10, 20 years to fill them up, but they keep on building more. And that was a huge demand for copper, timber, cement, all of the stuff that Australia is supplying them. And the prosperity that all of China's growth created caused a huge boom in automobiles and all of the retail goods. And so you're not supplying any more lead for car batteries, any more zinc for castings, any more iron for the steel to make the cars, all of the different things that all of the stuff that China was building. And then the global sag in demand of even things like computers and TVs and stuff. All of this income for Australia was supplying the raw materials for that stuff. And it's going to collapse probably back down to these kinds of levels. And that means an enormous portion of Australia's national income is going to be vanishing just when their economy has been pushed into massive bubbles by central bank meddling and government policies that created these bubbles. So for everybody, regardless of where you live in the world, there is something like this coming at you right now, and you have to figure out, like for instance, for me, I believe that that measured in gold and silver and cryptocurrencies, that real estate is going to become tremendously undervalued one day. Now, I do have a couple of small real estate investments that I made, and I know that they're going to lose at least half. I don't really care. I have the vast majority of my wealth is in precious metals and cryptocurrencies, and just a tiny, tiny percentage in some stocks that I think are going to do well. But this type of manipulation is something that always falls on the shoulders of the people, not the banks that are going to get bailed out, not the government, the politicians, not the people that caused it. It ends up falling on the shoulders of the taxpayer. And here is something, a quote that I found in 2013, and so I created this frame, was the end of this part of the presentation, but there's a quote in here. Reserve Bank of Australia, the RBA, announces committed liquidity facility, the CLF. And then the quote from the Australian Financial Review is, insufficient assets meant they had no choice but to give the banks a new taxpayer-backed line of credit. So the Reserve Bank of Australia gave the banks, which are doing fractional reserve lending and making up debt that you're taking on, at the stroke of a pen or by typing a couple of keys, they create this debt, and that creates the currency. And then if something goes wrong with that fictitious currency that they created, these digits that just are whipped up out of thin air, if something goes wrong with this plan, the taxpayers are going to pay for it, not the people that created the problem. I hope you learned something and got something from this video. If you did, please pass it on. I believe that understanding all of this information is very important for everybody right now, so that you can make plans and be able to see a little bit into the future on what's coming at you. Because this does not just apply to Australia, it applies to you. Thank you.